All right, everyone, welcome back to episode number 3 of Off the Radar, where we're going to talk about underrated, underappreciated, or maybe unknown punk rock albums. And I'm joined again by my friend Lewis, who was nice enough to pick me up from New Jersey this past weekend after I was stuck in Atlanta for 24 hours. But Lewis, how are you doing, man?
I was a little sleepy, after that late night drive to Jersey, but I'm doing okay. The holiday weekend definitely gave me some time to recuperate. So no big deal coming to get you. Happy to be here and excited to talk about some of these records.
Awesome. Yeah. And like I said, big thanks to Lewis for picking me up. Otherwise, this episode would not be happening. I would still be stuck somewhere in New Jersey. But I'm going to get this kicked off with my first pick, which is going to be Squirtgun's Fade to Bright, released in 2003 on Honest Don's Records. And I'm fairly confident that if you were listening to punk regularly in 2003, you're at least aware of this album because the advertisements were everywhere for this, because they got everyone to appear on this album. You've got members of Atari's, Anti-Flag, Alistair, even Mike Park is on a track on here. And if you don't know, Squirtgun features members of Screeching Weasel, most notably Master Genie. And this album is kind of like a mix of Major Label Debut and Bark Like a Dog era Screeching Weasel. So if that's your thing, I think you'd really like this album. In my opinion, it's better than both of those. But when I first got this, I remember not being blown away. I remember seeing all the guest appearances and being really hyped about the album. And I thought it was kind of a letdown. But over the years, especially She's Ohio, which is probably one of my favorite pop punk songs of the last 20 or so years. Seriously, guys, go check out She's Ohio if you haven't heard it. It belongs on every pop punk playlist.
Say something silly on a sunny 3 p.m. Nowhere near Ohio. She says something.
But this album really grew on me. Other really good songs, Model Builder and Bombastic Moon. Those are some more standouts. This is just a super catchy album, perfect for summer. If you haven't heard it before, go give it a spin, especially, like I said, She's Ohio. Lewis, anything to say about this album?
I think I've listened to this like around the time it came out and probably in your car. I recall liking it. It's just, me, I was always a little bit into the heavier stuff, especially back when this came out. I was going that gung-ho, it's got to be hard or I don't like it. So at this point in my life, I think I'm a lot more open-minded, so I'm definitely willing to give this one a listen, and especially going to go back and re-listen to She's Ohio.
Awesome, guys. So yeah, that's the first pick, Squirtgun, Fade to Bright.
All right, for my first pick for the day, I'm going to go ahead and pick Keep Your Heart by The Loved Ones. It came out in 2006. Loved Ones were based out of Philadelphia, and I don't even know how I could even say enough positive about this album. And the fact that I run into people who like punk rock and especially were listening to music in the early 2000s, that they don't talk about this album more just boggles my mind. This is one of the best albums of the mid 2000s, the 2000s in general. It came out, I think all of the tracks up here, and since we have the vinyls, I don't know what that total is. Let's see, we have about 13 tracks, right? So, almost every song on here could be a single. I was joking before we were on the podcast here, this is like a single album, because I could see a lot of any of these songs coming out. And it is actually shocking to me that the Loved Ones didn't have a lot of crossover appeal and didn't become a bigger band, because maybe if this came out a few years earlier when things were a little bit more focused on rock, they could have been huge. Songs on here that are just amazing. Suit Yourself is a great opener. Breathe In keeps it going. Jane is the song that most people probably would recognize. And, we were just talking about it, but Living Will Get You Dead is a fantastic song. And then, of course, we have 100K on there, which was previously released on their EP. So the Loved Ones are technically still a band, I believe. I double-checked. They haven't put out an album since 2008, which is Build and Burn, which isn't an album that I'm particularly fond of. I don't think it's a bad album, but it's certainly not as good as this album. And I heard they did some touring, but I haven't seen anything new come out. Dave House, who's the lead singer, has been doing and touring with his band, I believe Dave House and the Mermaid. I got to see them open up for Bad Religion. They were pretty good, but I haven't quite found the magic here for The Loved Ones Keep Your Heart. I can't recommend this enough. So, John, I know you also love this album. So is there anything that you want to add about this?
Yeah, I remember when we did the Fat Wreck draft, we were all fighting over this one because, yeah, it is really, really good. You mentioned all my favorite songs, 100K, Living Will Get You Dead, Jane. This album's awesome. If you guys are looking for something also that sounds like this, I recommended it before, but the Cold Years new album, Goodbye to Misery, sounds a lot like songs like Jane, the more melodic side of The Loved Ones. But yeah, I definitely recommend this one too. It would be one of my picks on a later episode if Lewis didn't pick it. So go check it out for sure. The Loved Ones, Keep Your Heart. All right, so album number 2 for me is going to be Lifetime's self-titled album from 2007, released on Pete Wentz's Decadence, however you want to pronounce it. And I know Lifetime is not underrated. They're not unknown. But this album's like an example of what happens when you go 10 years without releasing any music. Like, I feel like a lot of people missed this one. I mean, you guys probably know Lifetime. Like, so many bands have tried to emulate this style, like Saves the Day, The Movie Life. Back in the late 90s, everybody loved Lifetime, but they break up in 1997 after releasing, some amazing records, Hello Bastards, Jersey's Best Dancers. And the members go on, they form Kid Dynamite, None More Black, Painted Black, like a dozen other bands. I'm not going to sit here and name them all. But they finally come back in 2007, and without inciting a riot in northern New Jersey, this is probably my favorite Lifetime album. I think it's just so much more refined and polished than the 90s stuff. And it's just one of those records I can listen to the whole thing front to back, no problems. Just taking a look at the track list, you got Northbound Breakdown, you've got Haircuts and T-Shirts. Those are probably the two most known songs, but then it ends with probably my favorite song, Records at Night. Spiders in the Gardens, another good one. Literally, this whole album is it's only 11 songs, but every single one of them is good. And while I was looking up this, re-listening to it, I saw that they're working on a new album. So apparently 10 years wasn't long enough. It's been 15 years since this one came out. So maybe we get another record for a later episode. I know I've got my fingers crossed. But Lewis, anything to say about Lifetime?
I mean, Lifetime is my mom's favorite television network. So, no. All right, no. But no, I agree with a lot of what you said. And I did like the first few Lifetime records. This one I'm not as familiar with, but all the other bands that they kind of spawned to put out a lot of great stuff. So I'm not surprised that they kind of kept it going. 15 years later, I mean, who knows? Maybe this is like a pandemic record. People just got to talking again because they were bored and they said, let's make some music. So let's see. Maybe it's going to turn out awesome.
All right, guys. That is Lifetime self-titled from 2007.
All right, guys. For my second pick, I'm going with the Arrogant Sons of Bitches, 3 Cheers for Disappointment. So if you guys don't know anything about the Arrogant Sons of Bitches, they were based out of Long Island. Some members went on to found, I think they're disbanded now too, but bombed the music industry. So, a band that's kind of been around. But the Arrogant Sons of Bitches, the first time I saw them the first time I heard about them was on a Ska Sunday, I believe, at the Knitting Factory in New York. And they were opening up for The Code, who may also make this list at some point, Against All Authority, and the Suicide Machines. So this was like the best ska show of all time. And, normally you get 3 amazing bands, and the list of The Code was pretty good, too. In addition, obviously, the Suicide Machine, Against All Authority. You're hoping, the 4th band is going to be good, the local opener, the Long Island boys in the big city, and they were amazing. And I actually probably would have recommended their discography album here, but it might be a little hard to find. I don't know if it's rare, but I don't know how common it is. But this album is really good, too. So 3 Cheers for Disappointment, I believe, finally came out in 2006. Was recorded in 2004, if I remember, and they just kind of had a delay in releasing it. And I think when this came out, the band was already disbanded, but the album came out anyway. So definitely highlights on this one are So Let's Go Nowhere.
Everything
Kill the President. I always like Disappointment at the Taco Bell, and pretty much all the other songs. And I'll be honest, I can't remember all their names because look at these names. It's a lot to keep in your noodle when you're listening to it. But all I can say is this album is quite enjoyable. I would also recommend giving the discography, if you can find it, a listen as well. It has a lot of their mix of their EPs and differing audio qualities, but some of the songs on there are amazing too. But this is just a great ska band that I feel like a lot of people haven't had a chance to listen to. Now, John, I know I've made you listen to them a few times, but I don't think you're as familiar with them, right?
No, like I think the only times I've heard this was in your car. But yeah, that clip you put on before we started, I'll have to check it out again. I've been on a serious ska kick lately, so I'm always looking for more stuff. So I'm going to go check this out, and you guys should do the same thing. Arrogant Sons of Bitches, 3 Cheers for Disappointment.
You know the good thing about ska, John, right?
What's that?
Well, if you drop your love for it, you can always pick it up. Pick it up. All right, I'm done. I'm sorry.
All right, album number 3 for me is going to be No Triggers, Canyoneer, released in 2006 on Nitro Records. And Lewis, when we decided to do this underrated album series, like I had no idea how many times I was going to have to mention eMusic, but this is another band that I found through that platform back then. I remember I heard the song Neon National Park.
Dragging ourselves over the canyon. Wasted 2,000 miles wide.
And that was enough for me. Like I went out and I bought the album on vinyl. And guys, speaking of the vinyl, I get the discography or the track list from Discogs, and for some reason the vinyl is like thousands of dollars. So if there's a story behind why, because there's 1,000 press, so I'm really curious why this album's going for so much money. If you guys know, please drop it down below. Where they destroyed like the ET cartridges or something. But yeah, I'm curious. But No Trigger is a band that they're still around. They just released an EP, Acid Lords. It's actually really good too. From that album, go check out the song Brainwashed. It's one of my favorite songs of the year so far in 2022. But if I had to compare No Trigger to another band, I'd say maybe the more melodic side of Strike Anywhere, or maybe like a hybrid of Good Riddance mixed with 4 Year Strong, minus the easy core. Hold on, my cat is chewing my wires.
Oh, look at that little kitty cat.
But yeah, guys, No Trigger is one of the best melodic punk bands of the past decade plus. Like they don't have any bad releases. Go check this one out. Go check out the EPs. Adult Braces is another good one. Lewis, anything to say about No Trigger?
You know, I had heard Tycoon is I think that's the album that came after this. I don't know how many albums they put out, but that one was pretty good. Now looking at this album cover, I definitely got to listen to this. I mean, look how awesome this album cover is. Although we were discussing, we don't understand the physics of whatever that limb is that is coming out of the front of his body and bends in a way that does not indicate there is bone in there. So I don't know if that's a tentacle or his big red cock, but it is quite the cover art. So I'm definitely interested. That's my surefire way for me to listen to an album is if I like the cover art. I'm like a child, so I'm stoked.
Yeah, I mean, top tier cover art. And yeah, we have 2 questions for those of you watching. And why is the vinyl so expensive? And what is that limb? If you know the answer to either of those questions, drop them down below. This was No Trigger, Canyoneer.
All right, guys, for my third pick, we're keeping the trend of incredible album art alive here with Destroy Everything, Worship Nothing by Detroit's fucking own Hellmouth. So this album came out in 2009. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of members, but I think famously like fronted by Jason Navarro of the Suicide Machines. And it definitely has that style and vibe of that harder side of the Suicide Machines when they were kind of going into the hardcore punk realm from their ska-core roots. However, Hellmouth is way more brutal than probably anything the Suicide Machines have put out. Really going into the realm of like thrash, speed, punk metal, just a whole hybrid of stuff. And Jason Navarro's vocals for hardcore are incredible. So this album just kind of hits. I know I could recommend individual songs here, but I always like the opener the best, Pick a Coffin. I love that song.
Complex of war inside my head. I can't escape it. Every single stand. My isolation.
And while we're talking about the songs, I mean, just kind of experience this album all the way through because that's the way you're meant to listen to it. But look at these names on some of these. Overtime in a Shark Cage. That's like an incredible name for a song. And I think about it all the time. And I remember when I forgot about this band, I forgot about this album for like years. I remembered there's something about a shark. And it stuck with me. So other good songs on here, Drop Out and Destroy's good. Like I said, Pick a Coffin's probably my favorite, even though it's in the opener. And then Blood of Pigs is good too. So, I mean, the whole album is really good. Hellmouth did put out a few more records, I think, with diminishing popularity. And then obviously the Suicide Machines have just recently put out a new album, so I don't know if we'll ever see another Hellmouth album, but I would certainly like to listen to it. So if you guys ever get a chance and you're kind of looking for something really hard and aggressive, like this is angry music for an angry boy. So throw it on if you're in a bad mood and just kind of get into it. But John, I know you're familiar with this record somewhat. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, this album reminds me like those vans that you used to see in the 80s with like the little globe window in the back. Like this is the album you would drive around town blasting in one of those like old school vans with like a lion on the airbrushed on the side for sure. Like that's the vibe I get from this record. But yeah, this is a fun listen. If you feel like, blasting something incredibly heavy, because I mean, Jay Navarro is like one of the best punk vocalist there is, so hearing him like go full hardcore, like I still like it. I'm not sure if this is the album that had the Bible ashes pressed in the vinyl. I was under the impression that this was the only record they had, but you said there was a couple, so I don't know if this is the one. But one of their albums they put Bible ashes in the vinyl. That's how hard this band is. So
that's so hard.
Guys, if you're into like really heavy thrash punk, hardcore punk style, go check out Hellmouth. This is Destroy Everything, Worship Nothing. All right, so pick number 4 for me is going to be Fast Response in their album Welcome to Corruptia, released in 2014 on Morningwood Records. And guys, in my opinion, this is the definition of an underrated or underappreciated album. These guys only have 88 monthly listeners on Spotify. Like, that's absolutely insane because this album, and I'm being completely honest here, this is probably in my top 10, 15 albums of the past 10 years. Like, it is that good. It is so fast, aggressive, but you can actually sing along to all the songs and they'll be stuck in your head. I promise you. Like, Corruptia is probably my favorite song on here.
My mom was a lady. She wears dark she jaded. She couldn't afford to study abroad. A negative voice with a limited choice.
GTR would be a close second, but go listen to this album right now. I don't have a ton to say about it. If you like it, go look up Homeless by Choice. It's the one that came out a little after this. And all their songs are good. Seriously, guys, like if I had to say bands they sound like, I would say maybe Bigwig or Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes era Propaganda. Like I'm dropping some big names here. Like I know expectations are going to be high, but that's how good this album is. And just now I'm realizing the last song is Dear Landlord, which is a band I picked on the last episode. So a little bit, a little bit of coincidence there. But Lewis, I'm not sure if you're one of the 88 monthly listeners or not. Anything to say about these guys?
Well, I mean, you mentioned Today's Empires, which in my opinion is one of the best albums of all time. So if you really mean that, I'm going to have to listen to it. Although I will say, and I said it earlier in this podcast, that album art is a big reason that I would listen to a record, and I would not know what I'm getting from this one. So I'm going to have to take your word from it. Mm-hmm. And I really like the haircut style, though. So let's keep it going. And I'm going to definitely listen to Welcome to Corruptia the next chance I get.
Definitely do it. All right, guys, that is Fast Response. Go check it out. Trust me.
For my 4th pick of the day, I'm going with The Virus, Nowhere to Hide from 2002. And the Virus is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Got to see them a few times. But we've been talking about album art. That's been our obsession, this podcast, I guess. But Nowhere to Hide here is an appropriate album because looking at this, you know exactly what you're getting. You could just know, you guys see guys with studded jackets. They got their guitars. They look aggressive. And that's exactly what you're getting. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hate a little bit. I was never a huge fan of street punk or I guess fashion punk. I don't know what the correct term for it is these days. But, you had a couple bands that were pretty good. But in my opinion, the Virus kind of blows all of them away. And especially when this album came out, I don't even think the Casualties could touch them. And they were by far the biggest band. Although I think some of the Casualties albums that came out a few years later are quite good as well. But this album from 2002 really just hits all the way to the last song. My Life in My World is my favorite song, and it's the last song on the album.
You do exactly what you want to. When you enter to no one, you live exactly how you want to.
But pretty much every song from Another Day Goes By, even Vicious Rumors, Rats in the City, everything just keeps hitting. And they actually have a B-Sides and Rarities album that is also really good. So I know a lot of people kind of have a stigma maybe that I did that, street punk was a little something you should pass on if it wasn't your scene that you were into. But this was an album that I just fell in love with and made me want to grow a mohawk, but I never did. So, John, do you have any thoughts about this? I think we saw them at the Loft. I don't know if you went to that show, but they were still pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you, actually. I think when this came out, the Casualties didn't release On the Front Line yet. And for me, that's where the Casualties started to really take off. But I'm with you. I think this is one of the best street punk albums of that era. I think Matt was the one out of us who really liked street punk the most. I was never a huge fan either, but yeah, this album's awesome. Go check it out. And like Lewis said, My Life, My World's probably the best one on here. Go give it a listen. Even if you don't like street punk, it's actually pretty, not accessible, but it's pretty listenable. Even if that's not your thing, go check it out, The Virus. All right, guys. And so for my final pick of the day, it's going to be Secondshot and their last album, Bland Finale, released in 2008 on In Your Face Records. And this album is going to have a similar story to a lot of the albums I recommend here. In the early to mid 2000s, I was just looking for bands and albums that sounded like NoFX. And in some random message board, somebody said, you got to check out Secondshot from California. So I ordered 7 Years Bad Luck. I instantly connected with it. And honestly, guys, every album this band has released is awesome. But I think Bland Finale, which, Lewis, by the way, how good of a final album name is Bland Finale? You can't beat it. That is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
This one is definitely my favorite by the guys. Favorite songs on here are going to be Cyclone.
We're burning at both ends. We're looking for what's next, and not forward to anything. It's become a joke, and I don't think
Million to One, 8-month hiatus, Emeryville. The whole album is good, and it's 14 songs in 25 minutes. So if you're short on time, you can literally blow through this entire album pretty damn quick. And if you like it, the guys went on to form Symphony of Distraction and La Manta, and the lead singer actually has a side project, Lonely Bunker, which is pretty good too. And I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure Secondshot put out a new song last year or earlier this year, so maybe there's an encore to the Bland Finale. But Lewis, anything to say about these guys or this album?
Well, I was going to shit on the album art, but then he pointed out that it's called Bland Finale, which I'm going to begrudgingly say is an amazing name for a last album. And the guy's kind of getting into his little plane to leave. So it's kind of good art to go with it. 5 out of 10. Yeah. But I'll definitely want to give this one a listen if you're recommending it this much. I've never heard Secondshot at all. I don't think this is one that you really shared that much. So definitely going to give this one a listen, especially if it's kind of sounding like mid 2000s NoFX and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's like if NoFX played skate punk in the mid 2000s. It's really good. I think you'll like this one. I definitely recommend it. And I also recommend Symphony of Distraction, which is really similar sounding to this one. Go check them both out.
All right. All right, guys, for my fifth pick, I'm kicking it back to our leftover crack episode because we mentioned Citizen Fish, and I think we gave them a shout out that we liked all of their songs better than the leftover crack songs on that album. So I felt like I'd give Citizen Fish a little call out 'cause it's not a band that I hear a ton of people talk about. So for my fifth pick, I went with 1995's Millenia Madness that came out on Look It Records. Citizen Fish, if you guys don't know, is comprised of a lot of the same members of the Subhumans from England. So a vastly different style from the Subhumans. That's obviously a lot harder, anarcho-punk type stuff. Citizen Fish kind of goes into the realm of upbeat ska punk. This album is by far my favorite of theirs. That might not be a popular choice. I know like a lot of their popular songs are not on this one, but for some reason this one always clicked with me. Can't Be Bothered is probably my favorite song on the album. Although they keep going, and I like PC Musical Chairs as the starter, and then even all the way going down to Skin. So it's a really good album. I think if you like Subhumans, you probably like Citizen Fish, and if you don't like either of those bands, maybe give it a listen and see if it's for you. Now, John, I know you know nothing about Citizen Fish. I think this was a band that I just kind of went out of my way to find myself, like, you know, when Unix Punks, I know we've talked about Unix Punks and e-music and all this stuff. That was like, I went on Unix Punks. I'm like, what's the most underground bands that I can find on here, you know? And I like, when I like found Citizen Fish and like Subhumans and stuff, and I kind of got into them. I don't think you ever got into them, but any thoughts at all on this record?
No, the only Subhumans or the only Citizen Fish songs I've ever heard are from the Leftover Crack split, and I hated them. Like, I never, that was enough. Like, I didn't want to hear any more from them, but if this is drastically different, maybe I'll check it out. But I've never really been a fan of Subhumans either. That like early 80s English style punk has just never been my thing. But whatever, if you're recommending it, I'll give it a listen. And guys, I have some people asking if for us to make a playlist off of our picks here. If that's something you want to see, just put it down below, and we'll take care of it. We'll do it. I think it's a good idea. Lewis, anything else you want to say before we wrap up number 3?
No, these have been a lot of fun to do, and yeah, if you guys want the playlist, I think that's awesome way that you guys can check out these bands, at least the ones that we can find on Spotify. So, I think everything we've talked about so far is available, right? I don't think.
Automatic 7 wasn't, from what I remember, but I think, yeah, I thought Beefcake wasn't, but it was there. Yeah. But I think most of the other stuff, if we can't find the album, we could find a song, you know, be on a comp or something. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I think also we're gonna probably take a little mini break from these, but we're gonna come back and we're gonna do some more. And I think we're gonna probably go into the realm of like gonna hit a little bit more of those underrated records by popular artists too, I think. So I definitely have some really fun ones, albums that people hate that I want to talk about why I love them. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, we're gonna try to keep these going and hope you guys are enjoying them.
Yeah, so that's gonna wrap up for this one, and we have a couple things coming up. We have AFI tier list, then we have MXPX tier list, and then we've got Lawrence Arms and Face to Face all coming up. I'm not sure how long it's gonna take to do all those, but we'll finish them by the end of summer. That's the plan. So if you guys like it, make sure and subscribe, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.